Brian. I think your camera's sideways.
All right. Hey there, Todd. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you might want to turn your phone. Your camera's sideways. Yeah, that's fine like that.
Okay, here. Hold on 1 second. Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
How's that?
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Cool, man. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Ooh, not too bad.
Yeah, so I'm here with Brian McGrath. We're going to do some talk today about a few things he's doing and kind of his experiences. So I kind of want to start like just from the beginning with you. When did you kind of find the sport? Because everyone kind of finds it at a different time.
Yeah. Sorry, man. It's just breaking up a little bit. What was that? What did you say?
I was wanting to know when you kind of found the sport, when you found martial arts, because everyone kind of finds it at a different time.
Sure, sure. So well, I started getting into martial arts. I mean, I guess my very first experience was wrestling in grade school. I did that for a year, and uh, I wasn't very good. Um, but I was still really interested. My dad was a big Muhammad Ali fan and would watch boxing together. I kind of dinked around with other sports, uh, soccer and basketball, football, but I wasn't good at any of those either. And then when I got into uh, high school, I started to get into like taekwondo and karate, and did wrestling again as well. So that's when I got into it.
And were you, did you get into competing? Because I know eventually you found your way to Japan. So let's kind of talk about what led up to that.
Yeah, so I mean, when I was into karate in high school, I did a lot of training. There wasn't as much like competition as I was probably interested in. And I did some, but when I got into wrestling, that's very competition based. And so, but even when I got back into it in high school, I was really bad. But then I got into college and found mixed martial arts, and there were some local smoker boxing type matches in my hometown. So I did some of those, and yeah, that kind of drove me even more my interest. And I had my first mixed martial arts, my first amateur match. When I was 19, so I was probably a sophomore or junior in college. And then yeah, when I came to Japan, I when I was studying abroad, I didn't compete then. I trained with the boxing team and the kickboxing team, and it wasn't until I came back in 2000 and let's see, 2009, on the JET program teaching English that I got into actual professional kickboxing competition.
Yeah, because I lived there from 2002 to 2005. It's
Mm.
military time. So I was wondering, like, let's talk about the first time you get there, like your first experience. When you just like the first day you're there ever.
Oh gosh, like my first day in Japan. Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I So the first time that I came to Japan was when I studied abroad, which would have been 2004 to 2005. It was my junior year of college, and I hadn't really ever been abroad. I hadn't traveled much at all. I'd been to Canada. I guess that was like the farthest, um, or the the strangest experience I'd had with a different culture, which isn't different at all. And I, stepped off the plane at Narita, and yeah, just instantly, like, the humidity, the smell, um, and then once you're off the plane in the airport, the sounds of the people speaking, and it was really really overwhelming. and the first thing I had to do was take the transportation from the airport into the city on this train line called the Skyliner. And yeah, just doing that was like so challenging, that I thought, holy cow, man, what did I get myself into? And then I've been spending a lot of time living abroad since then, and so yeah, I think anymore I'm kind of addicted to challenging sort of intercultural experiences like that, I guess.
Now, where were you living that first time when you came?
So when I first came, I was in Tokyo because I went to school at a university called Toyo University, and I was pretty much in the middle of the city. I lived in a really small apartment, like all the apartments are in Tokyo, next to the Tokyo Dome. It's kind of in that area, the big, massive Tokyo Dome. It wasn't too far from there.
And when did you first start training there? Who did you find as far as the training location?
So when I came in college, the University Toyo is really known for sports and athletes and competition. And so I just, although I was focused on school, I was doing some training with the boxing team. And there were some guys who have, particularly one who's gotten to be really famous, Ryota Murata, the Japanese WBA middleweight super champ. He was on the team, but there were still some other really good fighters that have like done well on the more regional circuit here. So it was interesting meeting those guys, and then training with the kickboxing team a little bit as well. But it wasn't until I lived in Gunma Prefecture that I really got to dig into competing and training, and that was Muay Thai and Japanese style kickboxing. And that was at a gym called Joshu Matsui Gym, which is about 20 or 30 minutes away from where I lived. I lived in Gunma, very far north in the mountains, and I would drive down the mountain about half an hour and train. And I would do that 4 or 5 days a week. And yeah, my coach just said, all right, let's do an amateur match. And I did that. I had a draw, but I injured my ankle, and I actually had to get surgery. And he was really great, like, took really good care of me. In Japan, when you get surgery, you have to have like a guarantor, a hoshonin, someone that will sign for you. And so he like did that for me. And yeah, I healed up, and he was like, all right, let's do it again. And I had my first pro fight.
Now, let's talk about you end up in Gunma. That was because you were kind of assigned there when you were teaching.
Yeah, yeah.
You're right. Is they usually send people out more.
Yes. So on the JET program, absolutely. I was I was basically, yeah, just assigned there. And when you do that, when you do the JET program, a lot of people say, oh, I've got a girlfriend in Tokyo, put me close so I can go visit them. But I really did have a girlfriend in Tokyo, and so I was just lucky enough that they put me close enough. It was still like quite a journey, but that I could make it out occasionally to Tokyo. And yeah, it was a huge adjustment, because I grew up in a small town in Montana, but it's like, I think at the time 60 to 70,000 people. But this village that I lived in Gunma, Katashina village, was maybe 4,000 people, and just very agriculturally based, very rural. But the people were amazing. It was just, waking up in the morning to the sounds of like roosters crowing, and I look at my window, and it's just rice fields and mountains, and very beautiful. But yeah, not a lot of people.
Now, why is it that they usually send people out to areas like that when you go in one of these programs?
Well, that's a great question. The reason they do that is because the goal with the JET program is sort of this grassroots internationalization, and so I think it's like been one of the most successful like programs between governments of its kind I think ever. Like so many people have done the JET program, and it really is for the people that do it, like myself, an amazing experience to like get to see a side of Japan that is just really special and not very accessible unless you can have a job in one of these rural areas. And it's also a good way to like meet people who have similar interests to you. There are people in the JET program that just kind of do it and don't know anything about Japan, and they learn as they go. But in my case, it was my minor in college, Japanese, so I was really interested in Japan. So I got to meet a lot of people like that. I think I was the only one who was fighting competitively, but it was still really nice to meet all those people.
So you think they do it, it's more like to build a foundation for people that are in the program out in the rural areas?
Yeah, well, and it's to help. I think ultimately, you know, J- Japan wants to, because it was closed off country for so long, to just develop awareness about especially the English language and get some internationalization at this a small town level. And yeah, I mean, the thing is, a lot of the people that do the JET program, they end up staying in Japan, um, and they do good things like become lawyers and doctors, and not just kickboxers like in my case. But I think it's good both ways, because it definitely is great for the participants, the experiences they get, but it also helps Japan too, because it picks up some really good people that add to the culture.
Yeah, I lived out this place called Uraga, which is kind of
Mm,
like the last stop on the KQ line, like Yokosuka area, but the last stop on the, and yeah, it was kind of rural also.
wow.
Like everyone in my neighborhood knew who I was, and like because I had a house, obviously the military was paying for that, so like they all knew who I was. I was the only foreigner in that neighborhood, so they would come get me for little festivals, or if I put the wrong trash out, stuff like that. They all knew
Yes.
it was me. So
Oh
yeah,
wow.
that was a great experience too, because I got to meet a lot of people and from that neighborhood and stuff. So in that way, it's understandable that they would do it kind of in the way that they're doing that you described. So how long were you out there as far as living out in the country?
So I was in Gunma for 3 years, um, and then at the end of my stint on the JET program, I got married, and it was just a good time. I could have stayed a little longer, but it was a good time to move back. I wanted to go back home, spend some time with my family, and I wanted to kind of see if I could pursue, you know, a little bit of martial arts stuff back home as well. Um, I was back for 2 years, and the job situation. I mean, I liked my work, but I didn't have, back in Missoula, I was just working for the school district, um, and it didn't pay well. I really enjoyed the job, but it just was difficult to see long term how I was going to do that. I had trouble finding avenues for competition. I went to Hawaii to train, and Colorado and LA, and I kind of bounced around a little bit, and was just realizing, like, man, if I really want to do kickboxing, um, I need to just go back to Japan. I need to be in Tokyo. And so then in 2014, I came back.
And how did you come back that time? Did you get another English teaching job to get the access back, or did you just decide to move back?
So this time, because we're separated now, but my wife at the time is a Japanese citizen, so we were able to come back to Tokyo, and she found work with a company that she was previously with, and um, I had a job initially at a gym, um, and there was some problems there, and it didn't work out well. And then I just applied for a job at the gym that I'm at now, Club 360, and that I've been working at, yeah, pretty much since early 2015. And yeah, it's been great because I just get to be involved with kickboxing stuff all day, every day. So I work in the morning where I coach and run classes, and then midday I go train, and then in the evening work again, and then do a little more training, and I can just pretty much every day is kickboxing all the time. So it's a lot of fun.
And how does the visa situation work now that you're, you know, no longer with your wife, but you're still working there? How often do you have to work that situation out?
Well, that's a tough situation. So I'm kind of having to now figure out um, what I'll do about my visa, whether I'll have um, whether I'll be able to apply on my own or need to get sponsored through work, or but when I was before, it was just the marriage visa, which is probably the easiest way to come over. But if you work for a good company um, and you're interested in Japan, then that can be through work is a great way to come to.
So talk a little bit about your training in kickboxing. Who are some of the people you're training with, or what gym were you training out of?
Um, so, I mean, initially when I was in Gunma, it was Joshu Matsui Gym, and I was there for 3 years. That's still who I'm affiliated with. But when I came back in 2014, since I was in Tokyo, I couldn't go train in Gunma. So I started training with a gym called Wheela Sakurek, which is a Muay Thai gym. They're kind of like the Gracies of Muay Thai here in Japan. And they've got gyms in a few different locations, and they have really good trainers and just good fighters, and like compete a lot. And the trainers are all Thai guys who come from the sport. So I would go there and train. I train at a boxing gym with a former Japanese champion called K's Box in Ebisu, and he also used to work with lots of kickboxers like Masato, and um, he's great because he's got a lot of experience coaching boxing for mixed martial artists and kickboxers. And I did a lot of training also initially with my coworker at the time, Jan Kashuba, who was a former K1 fighter and kickboxer from Canada, and then one of his good friends, who was a big heavyweight kickboxer here in Japan, Koichi Pettis, who unfortunately has passed away. But I did a lot of training with him as well, and I've done a lot of work with other well-known fighters like Hinata, um, and a little bit of work with Uehara, another another heavyweight fighter, um, Takase Taiju, who has a win over Anderson Silva in Pride, and you just end up meeting lots of different Geo from um, K1 as well, and you just meet lots of really interesting people because it's kind of a niche, close knit scene, and when you're a little bit bigger and people need someone bigger to work with, I would end up just um, yeah, training with people, or at Masato's gym, Silver Wolf, doing work with the fighter Sugimoto over there. So yeah, um, it's been great. Even though the weight classes tend to be a little lighter here, there still is a lot to do as a bigger guy.
What were some of the events that you competed in Japan?
Well, I'm really lucky that I've got to compete in a lot of the big ones. So I fought in small regional events like Tribal 8, which is one that plays live music during the fights, like rock music. That's a smaller regional one. I have fought in some other smaller regional shows in Gunma. And then I've fought in bigger shows like J Network, M1, uh, and also then in the bigger international shows like K1, Rise, and Knockout.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, your first experience with K1, like, how did they approach you for that, or was that something where someone got you in there? Or?
Yeah, it was great. Well, my coach
Yeah.
in Gunma is also my manager, and so he got me the fight with K1, and it was just like kind of a good opportunity because they had opened a new weight class, cruiserweight, 90 kilograms, and they were putting on a tournament, and they needed someone as the American representative, and it was just great because I could slide in and do it. It's not my best weight class. I'm smaller, but I could get close enough to 90 that it was just a worthwhile opportunity, and it had always been my dream to fight in K1. And so, yeah, my coach lined it up, and we knew it was going to be risky. I had had a match 6 weeks before. I also had a trip back to the U.S. planned, and I just had to kind of do all that stuff. And I was, busy with work too, and it was an awesome experience. And fighting up in weight is tough, but it was really cool to just be involved in that show, fight at the Saitama Super Arena, like meet everyone involved. And I also ended up doing a lot of commentary for K1's YouTube content with my training partner and cornerman Philip Bennett, which was also a great experience.
Yeah, you do a lot of commentary now. So, how many events are you working with?
Well, I was working with K1, and then I got a fight with Rise, and they're competitors, and I didn't realize that K1, like I didn't have an official contract with them. I was just, it was kind of a verbal agreement. And I knew that they would want me to commentate for other people, but I didn't think that, I'm a commentator, but I'm a fighter as well. And I didn't think that those two areas would sort of collide, but they didn't like me competing for Rise. And they said, well, you've got to either not take this fight or you can't commentate for us anymore. And I said, well, this is what I do. So I competed for Rise, but I've been really lucky to do now actual live commentary with Rise, which is great. They put on a great show, the best kickboxing show in the world as far as I'm concerned, and it's awesome to be right next to the ring because I love kickboxing. I'm also a huge fan, so I get to watch these like great guys compete and see their corners, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think my favorite event to watch was the shoot boxing events.
Ooh.
At Karakwan Hall, I went to Caesar Gym with one of my friends. I just visited there one time, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought they had a lot of good fighters, and the events were pretty cool.
Yeah, they're great. Oh, they put on a great show. And they're awesome to watch. And I love how they have like their own unique style, the way they wear the spats, the long pants. Yeah, they've a really like strong following in Tokyo as well.
Now, kind of talk to me about what it's like being, because I know you and Stuart are both commentating, and what is it like being, these, is there any other foreigners besides the two of you that are doing that?
Um,
Japan?
well, Stuart does a lot of different commentary. He does pro wrestling. He does quintet, the submission wrestling, and he's done Pancrase and like UFC Fight Pass. Like he is an amazing commentator, and he does that with a couple other guys. He's kind of had some people work with him on and off, but I knew Stuart. We met in the changing room at one of these old tri-blade fights. So these tri-blade fights would be kickboxing and MMA rules. He had an MMA fight, I had a kickboxing fight. This was back maybe 2006, and I met him backstage. I'm like, who is this giant Scottish guy? But he was really neat, really nice guy. And then I met him again years later. He worked at the gym that I'm at now for a little while as well. So we got to know each other even better. And then I had that fight for Rise, and he had asked me in the past, hey, would you be interested in doing some commentary? Because he knew I was doing it with K1. He said, and I always had to say, well, I can't because I'm with K1. But after I fought with Rise, we give it a shot, and he does all the color commentary, and I just do the technical analysis. But we have a really great sort of vibe together, and I just learn a lot by getting to sit next to him and call fights with him. And every time it's just so much fun, because the reason that he loves it too is he's a fan like I am. So we kind of feed off each other that way.
And so how long have you been doing the announcing? Is this something you think you're going to do long term, or maybe, as long as you can?
Yeah, I mean, as long as there's organizations that will take me and are interested in my analysis and voice, then I'm happy to do it. It's great. It's like a dream job because I get to watch the sport that I love, and then I just have to talk about it. And sometimes I have to remember that I'm at work while I'm doing that, and make sure that I'm not just fanboying out and watching the fight. But it's awesome. It's a huge amount of fun, and getting to do it with someone that's as like skilled as Stuart is great, because he can really like mentor me and help me a lot, and I just pick up a lot by getting to sit next to him.
And like I was real close with Ryan Bowe, who, I mean, Japan basically became a part of his life long term. He is back in the U.S. now, but actually last time I talked to him last week, he's in Japan visiting it, because he has to, I think, do his visa status or whatever. And so do you think you're just going to stay in Japan long term then? You think this is what you're going to do?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you know, I had a fight in Knockout a little over a month and a half ago, and I suffered a pretty bad knockout. And I still think I've got some competition left in me, so I'd like to compete a little bit more. If something like that happened again, I kind of have to weigh, how much I want to risk, my dome piece moving forward. But I really love it here, and I would like to find a way to be involved in Japan. I also too have to think about, just long-term, my life and my career. What do I want to do? Do I want to be a kickboxing coach? Do I want a business? Do I want to, there's just a lot of things to think about. So I'm not sure. I think the first thing I need to do is compete until I'm ready to be done, and then close that chapter, and then I'll really know like what to do after that. I think I got a little bit left, so hopefully next year I can get another fight or two and then kind of feel things out. And if it still feels good, then I can push it a little farther. And if it feels like, well, I need to hang them up, then I'm okay with that too.
Because it is hard to come back, even for me. I mean, I was in the military, but coming back to the U.S., it's totally different. It's almost like it's not as interesting, maybe I would say, for me. And like I had this life that I was living, and now I'm doing this, and it's kind of like, it's difficult to come back. So I always wondered if that's something, because I know you said you went back to Montana and you worked for the school district. It's like,
Yeah.
How hard was that for you to do that?
No, you're absolutely right, man. I mean, when you don't realize this until you do it, but when you leave your home base, whatever that may be, when you step outside into the outer world, and you not just on, say, vacation, although you can still get glimpses of this through a vacation, but when you like live somewhere, um, you are really opening yourself up to a lot of possibilities, and you are also setting yourself up to sort of now have two places where your heart can lie, and when you are away from one of them, you're always going to be feeling these feelings of loss, or just wanting to reconnect with that life that you had there. And so when I'm back in the US, when I was back, I deeply missed Japan, and I missed the excitement, the struggle, the difficulty, but also, when you're here long enough, the comfort of certain things. And then when I'm here in Japan, I also deeply miss my home. But I know too that it would be harder for me to have the life that I want there, at least for the time being. So I have to look at things sort of logically, but it's hard to be anywhere now and not feel like I'm missing something. But that's the beauty of it. But when you become an expat, or when when you're out, you open up your heart and your life to new things, and then that becomes a part of you, and you just can't have all that at once.
Right. So what part of Tokyo are you living in now?
Well, so my two gyms are the gyms that I work at are located close to Roppongi, Nishiazabu, or Motoazabu, and Higashiazabu, so in the Roppongi area. And I live close to there because I work split shifts at two different gyms, so I can ride my bike. So even though it's maybe a little bit more expensive area to be in, I just have a small little apartment, and I take my bike to and from work, and it's pretty nice because I don't have to do a lot of train riding. So I don't mind not having to do too much on the trains.
Talk to people about Roppongi, people that have never been to the Roppongi area, especially at night.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting area. It's very close to a lot of embassies, the U.S. embassy, just the Chinese embassy, the Korean embassy. It's also a region known for bars and partying. When I was here in college, I remember being in Roppongi one evening, and I'm walking down the road, and it was after a Pride event, and I look, and I see Alistar Overeem one way, and then I look, and I see Frank Trigg in another direction, and I'm walking, and all of a sudden, someone bumps into my shoulders. They're tearing past me, and I thought, what the heck? And I looked back, and I saw a tattoo on the back of this guy's head, and it was a big guy, and I thought, oh my God, is that Vanderlei Silva? And so I circled the block, and he was getting swarmed by a bunch of fans. But I was so excited. I was with my girlfriend at the time, and I just grabbed a pen from someone and told him to sign her T-shirt, which didn't go over very well. But yeah, it's a wild place where all of the fighters would like to come party after the Pride and K1 days. But there are also some really nice residential spots close by, and there's these embassies, so it's like very international. And the gym that I work at has like a lot of business people, diplomats, people in academia, like just a very, very eclectic bunch. I feel when I go to work like I'm taking a trip around the world, people from Ireland, Norway, South Africa, China, Taiwan, Mexico. I've just met the most interesting people from everywhere. And Roppongi is very much like that.
Now, maybe talk a little bit about Pride. You were able to go to some of the events during that time?
I was so lucky. So when I was in college, One of the guys I was studying abroad with was a Korean American, and one of his grandma or his mom's aunt owned a restaurant very close to the Tokyo Dome, and somehow she was involved with bringing Korean fighters to Japan and like helping with that process. So he was able to get us tickets to some of the Pride Bushido events. So I got to see some awesome fights. I got to see Shogun Hua and Mark Coleman have their like fight, and then the brawl that ensued afterwards between the corners. I got to see a K1 event at the Tokyo Dome. I didn't have very much money when I was studying abroad, but I did like part-time work as like an extra on TV shows, and so I had enough money to kick $80 to a ticket in the far nosebleeds of the Tokyo Dome. I don't know how many people were there, 30 to 40,000, maybe more, for a K1 event where there were fighters like Peter Aerts, Stefan Leko, Badr Hari. Yeah, and so I got to see that, which was an incredible experience, even though I really couldn't see anyone because they looked, very small, like insects down in the ring. But it was an incredible experience.
I want to talk about the events today in Japan because, Japan when I was there was like the place to be, more than the U.S. as far as, you had the Pride events, you had a number of other events, K1, Shuto was real popular, at least among hardcore people, shoot boxing, zest. You had all these crazy events, and it seemed like everyone wanted to be there. But now, maybe because Pride went away and stuff like that. And so now it's like, what do you think about kind of where the place of fight sports is in Japan right now?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, obviously that time of Pride in K1 was a peak. I mean, the fighters were rock stars, and it was just like those shows, the production value, the amount of money that must have been exchanging hands. It was unreal. Now, kickboxing in Japan has gone through some weird changes. In the 60s, I believe, and 70s, it was one of the biggest sports in Japan. It was on golden time, 6 p.m. on just regular broadcast television. Everyone knew the fighters. It was huge. And then, there was the giant, massive boom with K1. Since then, it fell off. K1 made a bit of a comeback. It's not like it was at that time. You have some great organizations now like Rise that have some big backers that are trying to reach more international audiences. And the bummer is just COVID has really eliminated the ability to bring fighters in from outside of the country. So events like K1 and Rise that thrive on this international competition have become more domestic. But I think that will change, hopefully. And the Japanese people that work on the scene here, there's money to be made, of course, but they love it. Like, they pour their hearts and their souls into it. And they just love the fight world. And there's so many great feeder programs, so many amateur fights, and that is starting to come back. So, I mean, I think martial arts will always be in a good place in Japan. It's just a matter of those giant shows with the production value, reaching a big audience, getting fights like Rise, getting some commentary in English so that everyone can enjoy it. If the Japanese don't just look at their market here, but they see the world as available to them, and that people want to see these awesome fights that are held here, then I think, it will still grow and it will still flourish.
Yeah, because I know you have like Horizons trying to get back some of what Pride had, but it's like you said, because of the COVID, they can't have the kind of fights they probably prefer to have. and
Yeah,
it's
totally.
been stunted their growth.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's a real shame, and it's heartbreaking to see the struggle that the fight scene has had in Japan because of COVID. But Japanese are not um, they don't shy away from digging their heels in when it comes to disasters. You know, they're used to it, whether it be earthquakes or. So this is just another um, issue that if you put your mind to it, can be handled and circumnavigated. So I think, if anyone's going to do it, Japan will get through this. It's just, yeah, it's just a bummer to watch it all happen. But I think there's light at the end of the tunnel, and I think the thing is that the fighters here in Japan are just really good and really exciting. They have um, so much history, and it is such a part of their culture that um, yeah, it's always going to be here, and it just has to be available to everybody. And the internet allows that.
Now, have you been kind of keeping your eye on what's been happening in the U.S. events at all, or who do you kind of watch?
Yeah, I really enjoy boxing, so I watch the boxing scene. I keep, abreast a little bit of sort of the UFC and what's going on there. I don't know the roster like I used to. And it's interesting. I've had some friends, some retired fighters, do the bare knuckle, the BKFC thing as well. So I kind of watch that, and then if it's impossible not to notice the Paul brothers and what's going on with what is it, Triller, and some of those matchups. But stuff like that's always been around. Muhammad Ali had a fight with Inoki out here in Japan. I don't know when that was, 70 years ago, and so there's always going to be these crazy matchups and these wild shows, and I'm not particularly judgmental one way or the other. I I do I do like in Japan that like a winning record isn't what it's all about. It's okay to lose, but you need to go out there and challenge yourself. And I would hope that in America, there's a lot of this. As soon as you get a loss on your record, everyone's wanting that undefeated record, and I just wish that idea wasn't so important. It wasn't so much in the collective consciousness of the American fight scene, and I don't know, maybe exposure to other countries and fight styles, and maybe that will change. But I I would say I definitely follow things here more closely, but I'm aware of what's happening back home too.
What stuff are you, um, as far as boxing? Who are some of the people that you paying attention to? I mean, probably Canelo, obviously, but
Yeah, oh yeah, Canelo for sure. I love Canelo. I love well, and Triple G, especially if he was going to have this fight with Murata, which is just awesome. Knowing Murata in college and keeping a relationship with him and seeing him, win this gold medal and just go through all these, he's really pushing the boundaries of that weight class here in Japan and doing breaking ground that people haven't. That's been really great. But yeah, I love probably my favorite fighter is retired now. That although it sounds like he might try to come out of Marcos Maidana. Um, so but I love, even though I myself maybe am more interested in trying to have a little more technical style. I love all the different styles, and I love like Marcos Maidana's aggression and Lomachenko's amazing footwork and southpaw ability. Some of these fighters, from Russia or the Stan countries, the Eastern Bloc, Beterbiev and Bivol, are really great to watch because there's so many, even in boxing, just so many different styles. We have our own style back home that, and of course, the way the Japanese fighters fight. I spend a lot of time. I train at a gym that Ioka, the Japanese champion's at a lot of too, so I get to watch him up close and yeah, I really enjoy boxing probably as much as I do kickboxing anymore.
Yeah, it's just they're still having struggle not getting guys to fight each other. Like there's a lot of fights out there that I would like to see that what
Absolutely.
Lomachenko and maybe Gervonta Davis or some of the other guys at that weight. You know,
Hmm.
these fights that we want to see that maybe can't see. So in that way, it's kind of like,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and there's the one here in Japan, Naskawa Tenshin and Takeru,
you know,
which, I mean, make that fight because there's going to be a huge amount of money. This is what the fans want. Naskawa is, he's got 2 fights left on his contract. Um, yeah, and what a shame. What a missed opportunity to not have something like that happen. Yeah, and of course, God, it happens so much in boxing. It's kind of par for the course. So I don't know. There is still kind of an old school feel in kickboxing, and beyond those 2 guys, a lot of times those matchups will happen. So I think boxing needs a little bit of a kick in the butt, but there's just so much money involved. I understand too that when you're talking these multi-million-dollar paydays, it kind of changes the dynamics.
did you watch this Paul Woodley fight that just happened, or
Oh, which one?
the second one, Jake Paul and Tyron Woodley? Did you watch?
I've just seen the highlights. But you know what? I'm not a purist in that. Oh, you can't come into the sport if you haven't done it through the appropriate channels. Like I knew I knew that the Paul brothers, Logan Paul's, they're from Ohio or Iowa. He's like a really good high school wrestler, like really athletic. They're strong. It seems like they're training. They are big and they fight smaller guys. And MMA is different than boxing. Just because you're a tough MMA champion doesn't mean you're going to be a great boxer. And that doesn't mean that you're not tough. They're just different sports. They're very different beasts. And yeah, I kind of figured that you can't count these guys out, um, especially under the circumstances. And does it mean that Jake Paul is going to go out there and beat like Canelo? No, but I if he keeps doing what he's doing and fighting maybe guys that are a little smaller or guys who have trained to fight in MMA, maybe he can do some interesting things. I don't know. He can, unless he really wants to push himself in a serious pro career sort of direction. He could, possibly do that too. There's lots of ways to get in the sport.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to wonder where he would go from here with because it seems like a lot of the guys who want to fight are under contract with the UFC. So
Mm,
it'll,
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see what direction he tries to go after this.
sure, sure, absolutely. Well, that's why it's interesting. I it's not what would be great if boxing would just put on the big fights that it needs to, and then these fights wouldn't be as interesting because everyone would see the amazing skill level of these like vetted professionals. But until boxing does that, there's always going to be room for this, and I can't hate on it. It's interesting, so I like to watch the highlights.
Yeah, I actually like some of these kind of fights. These I don't know what I'd call it. Maybe like a hybrid celebrity boxing type of thing. But
Yeah, yeah.
I was surprised that like Nate Diaz extended with the UFC. I thought it would have been perfect time for him to come out and maybe try to fight Jake Paul or something and then call it a career.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it seems like there's a lot of money to be made there. So I wouldn't be surprised, just like this bare knuckle fighting organization is throwing big bucks at fighters and getting them to compete. I think whatever this Triller or whatever it is probably in the same position.
Right, they're putting on a huge promotions, huge shows, elaborate shows. It's interesting to think about it from these, it's almost like huge productions like Pride would do
Yeah,
that the UC doesn't really do. That's not really their MO, so to speak. You have to wonder, like, where's the money? Like they're putting all this money into the show,
mm-hmm.
but it's kind of interesting to think about because I think Trilla, from a production standpoint and stuff like that, it's light years ahead of anything that's going on in MMA right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They know what they're doing, man, and hit the social media real hard, and yeah, they promote really well, and yeah, it draws everyone in. It draws me in, so I want to watch the interviews and I want to see the outcomes, and yeah.
Well, as we're winding this interview down, I was kind of wondering, I was talking to one of my friends actually that I was in the military with, and he was actually thinking of coming back to Japan, you know, as a, just doing regular work or whatever as a teacher. But maybe someone who's watching this think about coming to Japan. What are some things that you would maybe want them to know or advise them on?
Well, I if you come to Japan, give yourself some time. Um, there's this little graph they'll show you with culture shock where initially, you get here and it's amazing. And then all of a sudden, you're really despondent because you realize how tough everything is. And then it slowly creeps back up and you kind of hit this baseline. And it's true. And Japanese people are great. Um, they they're just they have an identity and they're just a different culture and they do things differently. And as long as you keep your mind open and give it time, it takes a year or two just to kind of hit the baseline, just to get your bearings and to get to know people. And Japanese people take some time to get to know, but once you're friends with them, you can be friends for life, and they're amazing. um, and make an effort, no matter where you wind up, to really, an avenue like a kickboxing gym, or it could be any sport or anything, but taking the time to make real meaningful connections with people in the culture. There is so much there. There's some really great lessons, particularly I think that Americans, Westerners in general, can learn from the Japanese. And there's great things that we can teach them too. And it's easy to come here and feel how difficult it is and just complain and go, I can't stand this and I can't stand that. But of course there's going to be that. There's going to be that in your own hometown. But there are so many interesting things that you can learn and perspectives that can enrich your life, that just step outside of your comfort zone a little bit, and give it some time, and just keep your mind and your heart open. And most of the time, um, most people that I know that have done that have not been disappointed.
Maybe let's talk just a little bit more about your overall experience, maybe or maybe something you've learned as when you first started in Japan to now. Maybe something that, if you could look back on it, you think is pretty important.
Mm. I've learned there's a word in Japanese, a saying, shogunai, which basically would translate as, like what can be done. But I feel like in America, we're very strong individuals, and we feel like a very individual, personal narrative, in the stories that we write. And Japanese people kind of look at things in generally in like a more group setting, as a team. And part of that is being able to let things go. Part of that is, being able to sort of take the focus off yourself, to think about the group, to think about the greater good. Um, Now, this isn't the only way to be, but I have learned a lot about sort of community. I've got to think a lot about my own identity. Like, being in Japan makes me also realize, like, no matter how hard I try to be Japanese, I'm a Montanan, I'm an American, and it makes me analyze my own identity, probably more than someone who's never left the U.S. And I take a lot of pride in that as well. But I think I've learned in Japan just to just important skills in teamwork, like patience and understanding, and I think just things that you get in your interactions with Japanese people, where I would get really worked up or upset about something, and a Japanese person would maybe just be sort of more composed, or I would talk to my coach about an issue, and he would give me a much different perspective than I expected. And yeah, I mean, I think through all the difficult experiences I've had here, it's definitely helped me grow, and I think that I've added to my toolkit, and I'm very much certain of who I am. I'm spending time around a lot of foreign people, and I am 100%. I'm an American man, and that is an identity, and that is culture, and that's okay. And I also know where my weaknesses lie, where my strengths lie, and I hope that I've been able to pull from Japanese culture and my Japanese individual friends, and just better myself.
What do you think about some of the people in Japan that kind of went to YouTube and kind of used the fact that they lived in Japan to really become extremely popular as like creators and things like that?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's definitely, it still is. I mean, even as long as I've been here, there are some things about Japan that are just, I think sometimes Japanese people don't even know the reason for the way things can be. It's just the way things are. So there is a lot of great perspective that you can give people, a lot of very interesting things going on here. So there's a lot of great content for stuff on the internet. And as long as you're honest and not saying that you have to be overly respectful, but you just are honest, and you just give people the whole story and give Japanese people a somewhat fair shake, then I'm all for it. There's a lot of funny stuff here too.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people that have really big followings, foreigners and whatnot, whether it be through travel type stuff or day-to-day life in Japan. And I was just wondering what you thought about that stuff.
Yeah, some of it's great. I have a buddy who's just moved to Indonesia, but he lived here in Japan, and we spent a lot of time together. And he's doing something similar in Indonesia, and he he did a lot of it here in Japan as well. His name is Nick K, and he's got a YouTube channel, and he did a lot of interesting things in Japan, and he's doing stuff in Indonesia. And the Indonesian people actually really like it, because he goes to remote communities, meets people, lives with them, spends time with them. The world gets to see sort of the rich, interesting beauty of Indonesia or of Japan that you just wouldn't if you had only been to Tokyo, or if you've never been to Japan. You don't have a Japanese friend. So I think, as long as it's not mean-spirited, it can actually be really, really good.
Now, for people watching this interview, where can they find some of your stuff or follow you if they're interested in?
Well, I mean, if you're interested, you can search my name, Brian McGrath, on YouTube, or the kanji for my fight name, Burayan Bushido no Bu Kuru, Bushido no Bu ni Kuru no Rai, and Anzen no An. So there's 3 symbols for my Japanese fight name. I do a lot of stuff on Instagram, make technical videos about technique, or I will also put up photos from commentary, little stories from coaching at the gym, just kind of my life over here. And if you want to shoot me an email, if you have any questions at all, I love that. Brian, I guess you can send it to Brian at club360.jp. If you have any questions, or if you're happen to be in Japan and you want to do some training, or you just want to learn about the fight scene, get some coffee and shoot the breeze, you can always hit me up on Instagram too.
Well, Brian, I want to thank you for taking time to do this. It's great to talk to you about this stuff, and hopefully I can bring you on again sometime if they have some interesting fights, or if Takeo versus what's his name?
Tenshin. Yeah.
to
Todd,
care if that ever happens, we could talk about it.
you bet, man. I just want to thank you so much for reaching out and just having interest in my life and the things that are going on over here. And anytime you want to chat, man, let me know. I'd love to talk.
Yeah, I think it'd be cool if like me, you, and Ryan Bowe, or maybe some other guys that have all been in Japan, could
Yeah.
kind of. I think
My
that'd be
friend,
cool.
my corner man, Phil, had a friend that knew Ryan. I'll have to ask Phil how. But he met Ryan Bowe years ago. So that'd be great. Yeah, you bet, man.
Yeah, so you guys could kind of do it from that perspective, people. Because I feel like, yeah, I lived there, but I was in the military. It's a different thing, as to where people
Mm,
that have fully dove all the way in, and are having to live out, not really being provided for, and all those kind of things. So
sure,
I think
sure.
it's really interesting to do.
You bet, man.
All right, well, it was great talking to you, and again, just thanks so much for doing this, and I look forward to catching up with you again sometime.
You got it, Todd. Thank you, man. Take care.
You too.